She was just another passenger waiting for her flight at a crowded airport. Well-dressed and calm, she stood out, but to two airport police officers and a wealthy white passenger, her very presence as a successful black woman was an affront. She was stopped for no reason, bombarded with questions about her business class ticket and her finances, questions no white passenger would have faced. When she demanded basic respect and the rights guaranteed to every citizen, chaos erupted. Cruel insults and racial slurs rang through the concourse, hurled by officers determined to show their power. And in front of hundreds of onlookers, they handcuffed her, treating her like a criminal simply because of someone else's prejudice. But in their haste, these two officers had made a catastrophic error. They had no idea who she really was, an error that would prove costly, because this woman was not an ordinary traveler. She held one of the most powerful roles in the American legal system. What would happen once the truth came out at the airport station? How would these officers react when they realized whom they had just assaulted? Would their frantic apologies change anything? And what consequences would they and the woman who provoked them face? It was a Friday afternoon at Crossview International Airport, a structured kind of chaos. Flight announcements in crisp English blended with the buzz of multiple languages. Rolling suitcases echoed across polished floors. Voices, laughter, phone calls, and the cries of tired children filled the air, which carried the mingled scents of coffee, perfume, fast food, and recycled ventilation. Electronic boards flashed with flight updates in green and red. At Gate B10, where Transnational Airlines Flight 744 was scheduled for Chicago, passengers clustered in varying degrees of impatience. Some were seated, some stood or paced, some scrolled aimlessly through their phones. Among them was Celeste Moore, around 46 years old, projecting a sense of both intellect and composure, though she appeared weary from an intense 3-day legal conference. She wore straight-leg black trousers and a light vest. Her low-heeled shoes were comfortable but refined, perfect for a long trip. She had no flashy jewelry, only a classy watch and a dark leather handbag beside her small suitcase. Traveling alone and without any security detail, she simply hoped for a peaceful weekend. Not far behind her stood Mrs. Elaine Hastings, a white woman in her 60s dressed in high-end designer clothes, diamond jewelry glinting around her neck and wrists. Her expression was sour, her gaze disapproving. She constantly checked her watch, heaving loud sighs. Her eyes settled on Moore, her displeasure obvious. In Hastings's narrow-minded view, a black woman didn't belong in a business class line. Muttering that these times are crazy and anyone can upgrade nowadays, she made sure her comments were audible. Eventually, Hastings marched to the gate attendant's counter, adopting a haughty but artificially sweet tone. "Hey, you, why must I wait here with those people?" She nodded in Moore's direction. "Look at her. She's suspicious. She keeps eyeing my luggage. I don't feel comfortable traveling next to someone like that. They probably used fake papers to get into business class. You should check." The young gate attendant froze, trying to explain that Moore was a verified passenger, but Mrs. Hastings would not relent, escalating her accusations. Her loud claims caught the attention of two airport police officers. Marcus Delgado, a seasoned veteran with a biased eye, and Raymond Cruz, younger, more hot-headed. Hastings saw an opening and capitalized on it, her pleas dripping with manufactured worry, but underpinned by malice. "Oh, officers! Thank goodness you're here," she cried, turning in a self-serving display to Delgado and Cruz. "That black woman," she continued, pointing at Moore, "she looks dangerous. She's been glaring at me and my carry-on. She's giving me a bad feeling, and I don't want people like that near me on the plane." With practiced guile, Hastings fanned the flames of bigotry and fear to her advantage. Officer Delgado, already swayed by a personal prejudice, immediately believed the affluent white woman. He shot an accusatory look at Moore. Officer Cruz, fueled by aggression, aligned with Delgado's stance. Neither had any interest in the facts. This seemed an easy chance to bully an outsider regardless of the baseless allegations. Together they marched toward Moore, their posture rigid, projecting tension. Passengers in the line parted slowly, watching with anticipation and trepidation. "Ma'am," Delgado said, forcing a faux neutral tone that dripped with authority, "step away from the line. We need to speak to you." Though surprised, Moore did not lose her composure. She glanced briefly at Mrs. Hastings, who was smiling triumphantly, with her arms crossed, then calmly stepped aside. "What is this about, officers?" she asked, her voice steady. "We got a report from a fellow passenger," Delgado replied flatly. "They claim you're acting suspicious and may be a security risk. We need to see your ID and boarding pass." Moore carefully retrieved her driver's license and business class boarding pass from her purse, handing them over. "These are my documents," she said. "They're fully legitimate." "So, what sort of suspicious behavior am I being accused of? All I did was stand in line like everyone else." Officer Cruz cut her off brusquely. "Too many questions. Just cooperate. Your attitude alone is making me suspicious." Delgado glanced at her documents, then gave her another once-over, taking in the sleek ensemble and quality luggage. "Celeste Moore," he read, eyes narrowing. "Business class. How'd someone like you—" He never finished, but the implication was obvious. Moore felt a flush of anger, but kept her voice measured. "You're profiling me based on prejudice and false statements. My ticket and my line of work have nothing to do with you, so long as I'm obeying the law." She locked eyes with both men, her tone growing more resolute. "I'm a U.S. citizen and a paying passenger. I have the right to be treated without discrimination. The way you're speaking to me violates my civil rights and your code of conduct as officers." She lifted her hand pointedly. I'm asking you to return my ID and ticket. I also want your names and badge numbers." Her unflinching stance and bold words incensed the officers. Accustomed to seeing minorities cower, they were unnerved by her composure. Cruz barked, "You dare talk back? Who do you think you are?" "We're the law here," Delgado curled his lip. "You arrogant. Who do you think you're lecturing? We can do whatever we need to protect this airport. Want to fly today or get thrown in jail?" Their voices escalated, bursting into racial insults for all to hear. The gate agent, panicked, tried to intervene, but Delgado silenced him. Mrs. Hastings stood smugly to the side, pleased that her ploy had taken effect, and Moore was receiving the humiliation she deserved. Though Moore's heart throbbed with rage and hurt, she maintained her dignity. Taking a deep breath, she declared, "You've crossed a line. I promise you'll be held accountable." Delgado sneered, "We'll see who ends up paying." He raised his voice to a public roar. "Arrest her!" Disturbing the peace, refusing police orders, threatening airport safety. All of it was fabricated, But the officers were determined to detain the woman who had dared to defy them. At Delgado's nod, Officer Cruz sprang forward, grabbing Moore's arm with unnecessary force. She winced, but did not resist, knowing any movement could be twisted into grounds for further violence. "You have no right to do this." "Let go of me," she said, her voice resolute but piercing the silence. Cruz ignored her, wrenching her arms behind her back and slapping on handcuffs, metal biting into her wrists, delivering both pain and indignity. Every eye at Gate B10 stared. Moore, manacled for all to see, persecuted solely for her race and a false accusation. Delgado stood nearby, arms folded and smug. Under the bright terminal lights, Mrs. Hastings beamed in approval, arms still crossed, a predator pleased with her spoil. "Move!" Cruz barked, pushing Moore forward. Rather than escort her to the gate, they steered her away toward the airport security section and onto the on-site police substation, a humiliating walk across the busy terminal. Moore kept her back straight, maintaining what poise she could, though she felt eyes burning into her, reflecting pity, fear, or silent endorsement. Still, she looked forward, memorizing every face and detail. At last, they arrived at the airport's small police outpost. The background hum and foot traffic made the moment no less harrowing. Delgado and Cruz shoved Moore into the processing room, where another duty officer waited behind a metal desk. They rattled off a distorted account, framing Moore as an aggressive, out-of-control passenger. Her driver's license was handed over, her name typed into a computer. With rote monotony, the duty officer asked, "Occupation?" Delgado and Cruz smirked, expecting to hear some mundane job or a hopeless explanation. Moore raised her chin and took a measured breath, meeting the duty officer's eye. Then she cast a cold glance at Delgado and Cruz, who were about to grasp the scale of their mistake. Her voice calm, with an undercurrent of unmistakable authority, she stated, "I am Chief Judge Celeste Moore of the Federal Court of Appeals." A stunned hush fell. The duty officer's pen dropped. Delgado and Cruz's proud sneers evaporated in a heartbeat. Their jaws slackened, and color drained from their faces. They hadn't just insulted and arrested a random traveler. They had illegally detained a federal judge, a woman who could, in a single ruling, unravel their careers. Delgado stumbled back against the wall. Cruz began trembling, struggling to steady his breath. Horror replaced arrogance in their eyes. Realizing the depth of their error, they scrambled in desperation, spouting pleas for clemency. "Judge Moore, Chief Judge, we had no idea," Delgado babbled, voice shaking. "Please, we're so sorry. It's a misunderstanding." Cruz fell to his knees, tears welling up. "Your Honor, please have mercy. We were only following a complaint. Don't end our careers. We have families." Their frantic supplications did nothing to erase the cruelty inflicted on Moore only moments before. She had witnessed countless hollow apologies in her years on the bench. She stood firm. Turning to the duty officer, her calm voice echoed in the cramped room. "Officer, take these handcuffs off me, now." Startled, the duty officer did as ordered. Fumbling to unlock the tight metal around her wrists, raw red marks appeared where the cuffs had pressed into her skin. Her stare never wavering, Judge Moore continued, "Call your airport police chief immediately. Inform him I am here and contact the U.S. Marshals Service in this district, along with the Chief of Staff for the U.S. Court of Appeals. Tell them everything. I want their representatives on site without delay. No longer a detained passenger, she was a high-ranking judicial officer issuing official directives. The duty officer moved quickly, picking up the phone, voice quivering with shock and dread. No one disobeyed a federal judge, especially under these dire circumstances. When word spread that the chief judge of a federal court of appeals had been racially profiled, verbally abused, and cuffed by local airport police, airport management and federal authorities erupted into motion. Within half an hour, the airport's chief of police arrived, accompanied by deputies and senior security staff, all visibly stunned. Shortly after, U.S. Marshals showed up, along with staff from the Court of Appeals. A modest police station instantly transformed into a crisis center. The airport police chief hastened to Judge Moore, head bowed, issuing a formal apology on behalf of his department. He guaranteed an exhaustive investigation and severe disciplinary measures. An impromptu hearing took place in a back office, with Judge Moore recounting the entire episode, from Mrs. Hastings' hateful ploy to Officers Delgado and Cruz's bigoted misconduct, culminating in her public arrest. The court's chief clerk, newly arrived, also documented each point meticulously. Confronted with such clear and damning evidence, the airport police chief had no defense to offer. He acted swiftly. Both Officers Marquis Delgado and Raymond Cruz were immediately suspended, stripped of badges, firearms, and all police credentials. Internal Affairs was directed to cooperate with the FBI in a comprehensive civil rights inquiry. Further, the chief ordered all security footage from Gate B10, plus the officers' own body cam recordings and statements from airline and airport employees, be preserved as evidence. They also set out to locate and identify Mrs. Elaine Hastings, who had incited the fiasco. If she hadn't yet departed, the plan was to detain her at the airport. If she had boarded, local authorities at her destination would be informed to question her about filing false charges and using discriminatory allegations. Hastings, having discovered that the so-called intruder was, in fact, a powerful judge, dropped her arrogant front in panic. Confronted with the possibility of criminal charges, including false statements to law enforcement, she feigned innocence, but was exposed by the very officers who now tried to mitigate their own punishment by telling the truth. Though these were only preliminary measures, justice had begun. An expedited investigation began, led by the airport's Internal Affairs Unit and joined by the FBI's Civil Rights Division. The evidence against Delgado and Cruz proved extensive. Gate video surveillance, officer body cams, and a consistent chorus of passenger statements, including Judge Moore's own. It portrayed the same scenario: racial prejudice, abuse of authority, and illegal detention. Mrs. Hastings' central role in the fiasco was also starkly revealed. By maliciously lying and fanning racial prejudices, she effectively triggered the entire incident. When the inquiry concluded, the airport police chief took decisive action. Delgado and Cruz were permanently dismissed from their positions, the severity and clarity of their wrongdoing leaving no room for lesser punishment. Yet losing their badges was only the start. Because their offenses involved blatant civil rights violations and the unjust seizure and harassment of a senior federal judge, the U.S. Attorney's Office proceeded with formal federal charges. The pair faced indictments for deprivation of rights under color of law, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. Their high-profile federal trial drew national coverage. The prosecution laid out a damning case, founded on video evidence, numerous witness accounts, and the authoritative testimony of Judge Moore herself. The defense had scant grounds to counter. Ultimately, a jury found both men guilty, and the presiding federal judge sternly condemned their discriminatory abuse of power, which threatened the public trust. Delgado and Cruz each received 4-year federal prison sentences, a firm message that such actions would not be tolerated. As for Elaine Hastings, the ramifications of her deceit and racial incitement were also significant. Facing the risk of being charged with submitting false statements to law enforcement, a federal crime, and possibly a civil lawsuit from Judge Moore, Hastings' attorney opted to negotiate quickly. She pleaded guilty to lesser charges and was saddled with a hefty fine of up to $450,000. It was a massive financial blow, but a fitting consequence given her malicious, bigoted behavior. With the culprits held to account in various ways, the entire saga underscored grave lessons about prejudice, responsibility, and justice. In law enforcement circles, it re-emphasized the dire need for impartiality and accountability. To society at large, it showed the terrible harm that hate and bias can inflict, especially when wielded by those in power. Judge Celeste Moore, having endured a humiliating ordeal that would have shattered most people's faith in the system, returned to her duties with unbending resolve. The experience hadn't broken her spirit. On the contrary, it bolstered her determination to uphold an equitable, just system with no room for racism or misconduct. She understood the road to lasting change was long, but she remained steadfast. This story is a stark reminder of what unchecked prejudice and abuse of power can cause. Regardless of one's standing or title, if society turns a blind eye, racism can strike any target. If I were in the protagonist's shoes, I wouldn't stop with justice for myself. I'd keep advocating for those lacking the resources or platform to fight back. Will racism finally meet its end by 2040? Perhaps not yet, but as long as we keep speaking up and demanding better, that day will inch closer.